In this episode, we're going to focus on why AI security training cannot be a one-time event and how to refresh it intelligently when the world changes around it. New learners often assume training is something you do at onboarding and then forget, but that approach fails in AI security because the environment changes quickly. Threats evolve as attackers and misuse patterns adapt. Tools evolve as vendors release new capabilities, and regulations evolve as governments and industries respond to the risks of AI. If training does not keep up, people keep following old habits that were safe last year but are risky today, and the organization may not even notice until a harmful incident occurs. Refreshing training is not about constantly rewriting everything, but about keeping the most important behavioral guidance aligned with current reality. The AI Security Manager, AAISM, perspective is that training is a living control, and living controls require maintenance. By the end, you should understand what triggers training updates, what parts should be refreshed, and how to keep training effective without overwhelming learners. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good starting point is understanding what it means for training to become outdated, because outdated training often looks fine on paper while quietly failing in practice. Training becomes outdated when it teaches safe use assumptions that no longer hold, such as assuming a tool does not retain prompts when the tool's settings or service terms changed. Training becomes outdated when it focuses on a set of approved tools that have expanded, changed names, changed capabilities, or been replaced, leaving employees unsure what is allowed. Training becomes outdated when it emphasizes certain threats but ignores newer misuse patterns, such as new forms of prompt manipulation, output-based data leakage, or social engineering that uses AI to scale deception. Training can also become outdated when new regulations or contract requirements create new obligations, such as stronger transparency expectations or new rules for high-impact decisions. Beginners should notice that this is not a rare problem, because most organizations change faster than their training materials. When training is outdated, employees either ignore it or apply it incorrectly, and both outcomes increase risk. Refreshing training is therefore a way to keep guidance trustworthy and reduce guessing as the environment shifts. The first practical step in refreshing training is having a clear trigger model, meaning you define what events should prompt an update rather than waiting for an incident. Threat triggers include a new pattern of misuse, a rise in reported unsafe outputs, or a change in attacker behavior that affects AI systems. Tool triggers include the adoption of a new AI system, a major vendor update, changes in retention or data handling behavior, or new features that change how users interact with the system. Regulatory triggers include new laws, new guidance, new enforcement actions that clarify expectations, or new contract clauses for major partners. Organizational triggers include expansions into new markets, new product launches using AI, or changes to governance routines like new approval checkpoints. Beginners often think updates should happen on a fixed annual schedule, but AI change can happen faster than that, so event triggers are essential. A mature approach combines periodic reviews with event-based updates, so training stays stable but responsive. This prevents the organization from being surprised by risk while also avoiding constant churn. When you refresh training, it helps to focus on what parts actually need to change, because learners can only absorb so much change at once. Usually, the core safety habits remain stable, such as not using sensitive data and unapproved tools, verifying outputs before high-impact use, and escalating uncertainty. What changes is the context, such as which tools are approved, which data types are most at risk, and which misuse patterns are appearing. This is why the best training programs are built around stable principles and behaviors, with modular updates for changing details. Beginners should recognize that if training is built as one giant course, updates become expensive and slow, and that delay increases risk. If training is built as smaller units, you can update the relevant unit quickly without rewriting everything. For example, you might update the unit that explains how prompts and outputs are handled when a tool's retention behavior changes, while leaving the general acceptable use guidance unchanged. This modular design is a form of control because it increases the organization's ability to adapt. In AI security, adaptability is not optional, it is part of staying safe. Threat-driven refreshes are especially important because they teach people what to watch for in real time, and they can significantly reduce incidents by changing behavior early. A threat-driven refresh might introduce a new misuse pattern, such as employees being tricked into sharing sensitive data through AI-generated phishing messages. It might also cover output manipulation patterns where users are encouraged to trust an output that contains hidden instructions or misleading claims. Another threat-driven refresh could focus on data leakage through outputs, such as the system revealing internal information when asked in certain ways. Beginners should understand that threat refreshes should not be overly technical because the goal is behavior change, like recognizing warning signs and escalating quickly. A strong approach is to describe the threat in plain terms, explain why it matters, and provide a simple action rule that can be applied immediately. For example, a rule might be to verify unusual requests through a second channel or to avoid feeding any sensitive information into a tool when the request seems suspicious. Threat refreshes are most effective when they are short, timely, and connected to real examples from the organization's environment. This makes the training feel relevant and increases adoption. Tool-driven refreshes are also crucial because tools evolve in ways that can change risk without obvious warning to users. A tool might add a feature that allows broader access to internal data sources, which increases the risk of sensitive output exposure. A tool might change how it stores prompts and outputs, which changes privacy and retention risk. A tool might integrate with other systems, expanding the blast radius of misuse if access controls are weak. Beginners should notice that many users do not read release notes or service terms, so they cannot be expected to track tool changes on their own. Training refreshes fill that gap by telling users what changed and what behaviors must change in response. A tool-driven refresh might update what tools are approved for which data types, or it might update acceptable use boundaries based on new capabilities. It should also explain the reason behind the update, such as changes in data handling or new misuse pathways. Tool refreshes should be coordinated with governance because governance sets approval boundaries, and training must reflect those boundaries accurately. When tool refreshes are handled well, employees stay aligned with current reality and avoid accidental violations. Regulation-driven refreshes can feel intimidating to beginners, but they become manageable when you translate them into plain behavioral requirements. When new regulations or guidance appear, training should focus on what employees must do differently, not on legal text. For example, a new transparency expectation might require clearer labeling of AI-generated content in certain contexts, or a new requirement might tighten oversight for high-impact decision systems. A regulation-driven refresh might also update what evidence must be captured during system use or change, such as documenting certain reviews or approval steps. Beginners should understand that regulations often affect the organization's processes and documentation, which then affect what employees must do. Training refreshes should therefore be coordinated with policy and procedure updates so instructions remain consistent. Another important idea is that regulation-driven training should be role-specific because not everyone needs the same detail. General employees might need updated rules for acceptable use and reporting, while managers might need updated approval thresholds and oversight expectations. When regulation-driven refreshes are practical and role-aware, they reduce fear and increase compliance. A major challenge in refreshes is avoiding training fatigue, which happens when employees feel like training is endless and constantly changing. To avoid fatigue, refreshes should be purposeful, short, and focused on what matters most. They should clearly explain what changed and what action is required, rather than repeating everything that was already taught. They should also be timed thoughtfully, because sending multiple updates at once can overwhelm learners and reduce retention. Beginners should appreciate that training fatigue is a security risk because fatigued learners stop paying attention and may bypass guidance. A mature program manages fatigue by using a predictable rhythm for updates, such as scheduled periodic refresh windows, while also allowing urgent updates when necessary. It also uses multiple reinforcement formats, such as short reminders and brief scenario explanations, instead of relying only on long modules. Another effective approach is to tie refreshes to specific roles and workflows, so only the people affected by a change receive detailed updates. By respecting attention and time, the program increases the chance that refresh messages are remembered and applied. Refreshes should also integrate lessons learned from incidents and near misses, because real events provide the most meaningful teaching moments. When something goes wrong, the organization can identify what behavior contributed to the issue, what confusion existed, and what guidance would have prevented it. Training refreshes can then focus on that gap, such as clarifying what data is prohibited, improving reporting expectations, or correcting a common misconception about tool behavior. Beginners should understand that this is not about blaming individuals. It is about improving the system of guidance and controls. A mature program uses incidents as feedback to refine training, policies, and procedures, making the organization safer over time. This also increases credibility, because employees see that training is connected to real risk, not generic corporate content. Incident-based refreshes should be careful to communicate the lesson without exposing sensitive details, but they should still be specific enough to be actionable. They should also include what to do next time, because behavior change requires a clear alternative. When lessons learned become training updates, the organization turns mistakes into stronger defenses. Refreshing training also requires coordination with governance and documentation, because training must reflect current policies, approved tools, and procedures. If training says one thing and policy says another, employees will be forced back into guessing, and that undermines both compliance and trust. Coordination means that when policies are updated, training is updated as well, and when approved tool lists change, training reflects those changes quickly. It also means training includes current escalation paths, such as who owns an AI system and how to report issues. Beginners should see this coordination as part of change control, because training is a control artifact just like policies and procedures. Training content should therefore have an owner, versioning, and a review process, especially for high-impact topics like data handling and high-risk use cases. Coordination also supports defensibility, because an auditor or regulator may ask how employees are trained on obligations, and consistent materials provide strong evidence. When training is synchronized with governance, it becomes a reliable extension of the program rather than a disconnected activity. This alignment reduces both risk and frustration. Measurement is another key element of deciding when and how to refresh training, because you should update based on signals rather than guessing. Signals can include trends and policy questions, repeated types of errors, patterns in reported unsafe outputs, or audit findings that suggest misunderstanding. It can also include changes in tool adoption behavior, such as increased use of unapproved tools, which might indicate that approved tools are not meeting needs or that training is unclear. Beginners should understand that measurement is not only about catching violations, it is about understanding where guidance is failing. If employees repeatedly make the same mistake, that might mean the training did not teach a clear alternative, or the workflow makes the safe option too hard. Measurement also helps you evaluate whether a refresh worked, such as whether reporting increased or whether certain risky behaviors decreased after the update. A mature program uses these metrics to refine future refreshes and to target training where it will have the greatest impact. This makes training more efficient and reduces fatigue because updates are focused rather than random. When the program uses measurement and feedback, training becomes part of continuous improvement. Finally, refreshing training should reinforce the idea that safe AI use is a shared responsibility supported by clear processes, not a personal guessing game. When threats, tools, and regulations change, employees need to feel that the organization will provide updated guidance and that asking questions is expected. A culture that punishes uncertainty will cause people to hide mistakes and continue risky behavior quietly, which is exactly what you want to avoid. A mature program, therefore, pairs refreshes with clear communication from leadership that safety and compliance are part of normal professional work. It also ensures that approval and reporting processes remain usable, because training cannot compensate for broken processes. Beginners should recognize that training refreshes are most effective when they are backed by real support, such as clear escalation paths and timely governance decisions. When people see that the organization is responsive and consistent, they are more willing to follow guidance and less likely to bypass it. Refreshing training is therefore not just an educational task. It is a trust-building task that supports sustainable AI adoption. As we wrap up, refreshing AI security awareness training is essential because the risk environment changes through evolving threats, changing tools, and shifting regulatory expectations. A mature program defines triggers for updates, focuses refreshes on what actually changed, and keeps core behavioral habits stable while updating the context around them. Threat-driven refreshes teach new warning signs and safe responses. Tool-driven refreshes align behavior with new capabilities and data handling realities, and regulation-driven refreshes translate obligations into practical actions without overwhelming learners. The program avoids training fatigue by keeping updates short, purposeful, and role-aware, and it uses incidents and near misses as feedback to strengthen guidance over time. It coordinates training changes with policy and procedure change control so employees receive consistent instructions and the organization maintains defensible evidence of education. Finally, it measures outcomes and uses those signals to target future refreshes, making training a living control that improves continuously. When you can describe training refresh in this structured way, you are thinking like an AAISM who understands that people, tools, and obligations evolve together and that safety depends on keeping guidance current and usable.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.